Some mornings feel heavy before they even begin, like the world is holding its breath, waiting for a storm you didn't ask for. In Brighton Hill, a quiet coastal town where waves brushed the docks like old secrets and sunlight crawled slow, across cobblestone streets, 17-year-old Darius Bennett woke up with a mission. It was Father's Day weekend, and this wasn't just any errand. This was the day he'd been preparing for. This was the day he would honor the man who wore duty like armor and sacrifice like skin, his father, Staff Sergeant Anthony Bennett, who was finally coming home after 6 long months overseas. Darius wasn't your typical teen. There was a gravity in his gaze that made people pause, if they bothered to look beyond the wheelchair. His legs, scarred and healing from a recent accident, lay still beneath his khakis. His movements were quiet, intentional. The kind of quiet forged not from fear but from discipline. For weeks he had skipped lunch, turned down hangouts, and spent late nights crafting leather bracelets and phone charms, selling them online, one by one. Every dollar had been saved for this single purpose: to buy his father a Lancaster silk tie, navy blue with fine silver embroidery, the kind his dad admired but never bought for himself. Outside the boutique storefront of Lenox and Hill, the most prestigious men's shop in Brighton Hill, Darius sat motionless in his motorized wheelchair, gazing through the glass like someone peering into a world that never expected to include him. The store was bathed in morning light and silent elegance. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings. Tailored suits stood like statues, and ties were laid out like sacred relics on velvet. Darius adjusted the gray fleece blanket over his lap, his left hand gripping the joystick. His reflection in the glass looked calm, collected. But inside, he was rehearsing everything: what to say, how to speak, how not to flinch if someone looked at him like he didn't belong. His mom had said she'd meet him there. Chief Linda Bennett of the Brighton Hill Police Department, known for her steel stare and steady hands, had promised moral support. But a last-minute message said, duty called. She couldn't come. Darius wasn't surprised. She never said it out loud, but she wore the town's burdens like a badge beneath her uniform. Still, this wasn't something he needed help with. He had everything he needed: his money, his reason, his resolve. He smoothed his collar one more time, tucked his wallet securely under his thigh, and took a deep breath. The door chimed softly as he pushed the joystick forward and crossed the threshold. Inside, the scent of cedar polish and expensive cologne welcomed him, but the warmth didn't last. Behind the gleaming counter stood a woman in her 50s, tall, poised and cold as winter glass. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, her cream pantsuit immaculate. The name tag read, Chelsea Grant, Senior Associate. Her smile was polished, professional, but something shifted the second she saw him. A flicker in the eyes. A pause too long. Her gaze scanned him like a scanner at airport security, from wheelchair to gray sweater to the backpack on his lap. The moment stretched thin. Darius didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence said it all. Then, with careful calm, he broke it. "Hi, ma'am. I'd like to take a look at the Lancaster tie in the window. The navy one, with the silver embroidery." His voice was steady, polite, practiced. Chelsea didn't move. The smile never reached her eyes. Her manicured hand hovered just inches from the small black security button beneath the register. And just like that, what should have been a simple morning began to unravel. The interior of Lenox and Hill was crafted like a dreamscape for wealth. Everything whispered exclusivity. The marble floors gleamed under the weight of time and polish. Chandeliers cast golden halos across tailored suits that stood like royalty, behind glass, and the air hung thick with the scent of cedarwood and expensive cologne. It was the kind of place where people instinctively lowered their voices and straightened their posture, as if the walls themselves were watching. Chelsea Grant stood guard like a queen with no kingdom to defend, dressed in a cream pantsuit so precise it looked painted on. Her icy blonde hair was coiled in a tight knot at the nape of her neck. She exuded the kind of poise that didn't bend. It snapped. Her posture was exact, her expression unreadable, and her smile, if it ever existed, had long since frozen into something brittle. When Darius asked about the tie, the Navy Lancaster with the silver embroidery, she didn't answer right away. A pause lingered, not just the kind meant to consider, but one that calculated. Her eyes, sharp as needles, scanned him from the wheels of his chair up to his careful eyes. "Are you sure?" she said finally, her voice butter-smooth but colder than the marble beneath them. Darius's heart rate didn't change. His expression stayed calm. He'd expected hesitation, maybe even surprise. But this skeptical tone laced with disbelief, it wasn't new. "Yes, ma'am," he said gently. "I'd like to see it." Chelsea's smile didn't move. "That one's quite expensive," she added, gesturing to the display. 100% silk, imported, limited edition. With the steadiness of someone raised to never flinch first, Darius unzipped the front pocket of his bag and retrieved a neatly folded envelope. Inside was $420, his entire savings. He placed it softly on the glass. "I've got it covered," he said. Chelsea's gaze didn't drop to the envelope. It stayed locked on him. Her eyes narrowed. "Where'd you get that kind of money?" "I run a small business," Darius replied, crisp and clear. "Custom bracelets, tech sleeves, online sales." Her lips twitched into a tight smile that wasn't amusement, wasn't kindness, it was disbelief. "A business," she echoed, her tone like static in a quiet room. "Online?" She leaned slightly forward, one manicured finger tapping near the small black button beneath the counter. A gesture casual in appearance, but deeply intentional. Darius felt it. The air shift. The weight of the room bending, warping. He'd known this shift before. In airports, where security eyes lingered too long. In classrooms when teachers questioned his work. In stores like this one where his presence was always a question mark waiting to become an exclamation point. He drew a steady breath. "Can I please see the tie?" Chelsea sighed as though burdened. Slowly she turned, unlocked the display case, and pulled out the tie with dramatic care, as if she were lifting a diamond from silk. She laid it on a velvet mat. "Be careful with it," she said, sharply now. "It's worth more than what you probably make in a year." That line wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Darius's jaw clenched slightly, but he said nothing. His fingers moved with deliberate gentleness as he lifted the tie. It was soft, luxurious. Its deep navy threads, catching the chandelier light like ocean waves beneath moonlight. The silver embroidery sparkled just faintly, understated, elegant. Just like his father, Darius turned the tie in his hands, admiring the craftsmanship, the way it seemed to hold both strength and grace. Then, without warning, the silk slipped. It slid from his fingers, fluttered down like a whisper, landing, first on the counter, then bouncing softly to the floor. It should have been nothing, a moment, a mistake, but it wasn't. Chelsea gasped like she'd witnessed a crime. "Oh my God," she shrieked, her voice slicing through the air. "I knew it! You were trying to steal it, weren't you?" Darius blinked, stunned. "What? No, But she didn't let him finish. She lunged for the store phone, voice climbing in volume and venom. "Security, now! Young black male, wheelchair, attempted theft." And just like that, the temperature in the room dropped to freezing. Darius sat frozen in his chair, one hand gripping the armrest, the other still, raised from trying to catch the tie. The store had gone quiet, but not still. Customers began to shift. An older woman clutched her purse. A man stepped back near the cashmere coats. Eyes darted. Assumptions clicked into place like loaded weapons. Chelsea stood tall, triumphant, painting herself the victim of a narrative she had crafted from thin air. Her voice, full of righteous fury, filled every corner of the store. And the truth, the real truth, lay helpless on the floor, as forgotten as the tie. The worst part wasn't the accusation. It wasn't the gasps or the glances. It was the look on Chelsea's face. Satisfaction, Vindication, like she'd always known she was right. And Darius realized in that hollow moment that no tie, no money, no amount of dignity could have saved him from a judgment that was made the moment he rolled through that door. The silk tie had been a gift. Now, it was evidence. And the room was no longer a store, it was a courtroom. Chelsea's scream cracked like thunder, loud and jarring. "Security now, young black male, wheelchair, attempted theft." Her voice bounced off the marble and brass like a siren that didn't need backup. But backup was coming. Darius didn't move. Couldn't. His heart thudded like a drum in a funeral march, but his expression stayed still, just like his mother had taught him. The tie lay forgotten on the floor, but Chelsea's performance had already eclipsed the facts. Her voice, her outrage, her frantic gestures, all of it painted a story that observers were too quick to believe. Around him, the room shifted. People who'd barely looked up minutes ago now stood frozen, watching. An elderly woman whispered something to her husband. A man in a sport coat subtly stepped behind a display rack, phone raised halfway as if to record, just in case. No one moved to help. No one asked questions. They didn't need to. They had already decided who Darius was, suspect, not shopper. Chelsea's voice dropped an octave as she turned away from the phone, eyes narrowing with practiced contempt. "You people always think you're slick," she sneered. "Walk in here like you belong. Try to walk out with what you didn't earn." Darius sat frozen in his chair, stunned but composed. Her words weren't new. They were inherited. Words passed down like heirlooms by people who'd never questioned their own reflection. He opened his mouth to speak, but what came wasn't a protest. It was a whisper. "I didn't steal anything." Chelsea's hand moved before her conscience could stop it. The slap cracked across Darius's face, sharp and mean. The sound echoed. A pen dropped. Someone gasped. One woman instinctively covered her mouth. Still, Darius didn't flinch. His head had turned with the blow, but his eyes, those focused, quiet eyes, never left hers. He didn't cry. Didn't yell. That silence, that unbending restraint, was louder than anything else. Chelsea folded her arms across her chest like she'd just closed a case. Her voice curled in triumph. "Don't play innocent now." The store fell back into a quiet horror. And then, it wasn't quiet anymore. Sirens, distant, rising, like a coming storm with no mercy. Darius exhaled once, slowly, like preparing for impact. The glass doors flew open with a rush of cold air and authority. 2 officers stormed in, boots clapping hard against the polished floor. One tall, gray-haired and commanding, Sergeant Miller. The other younger, more alert, hesitant, Officer Reyes. "There he is." Chelsea pointed with a shaky finger as if the store were a crime scene, and she the last honest witness. "That's him. Tried to steal from me. Dropped the tie when I caught him." Miller didn't waste a second. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Hands where I can see them." Darius kept his hands where they'd always been, visible, unmoving. "I didn't do anything," he said. Calm but louder now, every syllable carved from control. Reyes hesitated. His eyes darted between the tie on the ground, Chelsea's flushed face, and Darius's stillness. Something didn't sit right, but Miller had already stepped closer, cuffs dangling from his hand. "You can explain yourself downtown." Darius's mouth went dry. He'd seen this play out on screens, in protests, and hashtags. He knew how easily this moment could twist, how a single breath too fast could become a threat. But he didn't beg. He didn't plead. He did one thing. He spoke. "Call my mother." Miller didn't blink. "You'll get your phone call later." "No," Darius said louder, firmer. "Call my mother now." Chelsea laughed, a dry, condescending thing. "Let him call Mommy," she sneered. "What's she gonna do, tweet about it?" Darius ignored her. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his lap and pulled out his phone. One touch, one contact. The screen lit up. "Mom." He brought the phone to his ear. It rang. Once. Twice. Then, "Mom, it's happening," he said. Lennox and Hill. There was silence. Then the call disconnected. Miller looked impatient. Reyes looked unsettled. Chelsea looked smug. And then the front doors exploded open again, not with noise, but with presence. A tall black woman in a tailored navy pantsuit strode in, each heel striking the marble like a gavel in a courtroom. Her badge glinted under the crystal chandeliers. Her eyes were fixed like guided missiles. "I'm Chief Linda Bennett," she announced. Her voice didn't raise. It didn't need to. "And this," she pointed to Darius, "is my son." The room froze. Miller's hands, once inches from the cuffs, lowered. His jaw clenched. Reyes straightened. "Chelsea?" She paled like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Linda's gaze was fixed on Miller. "Sergeant," she said coolly, "I assume you have a very good reason why my son was about to be cuffed without a single question asked." Miller opened his mouth. Words failed him. Chelsea tried. He dropped the tie. He was trying to hide it, I saw." Linda didn't even blink. "Did you review the footage?" Silence. Reyes spoke up quietly, almost in apology. "We were just about to." Linda cut in like a blade through cloth. "No, you weren't. You were about to arrest an innocent teenager without evidence." Chelsea's composure crumbled. "I know what I saw. People like him." Linda turned, and the entire store held its breath. The silence inside Lennox and Hill was thick enough to swallow breath. Customers who had once whispered quietly between velvet-lined displays now stood as still as the mannequins. Eyes darted between Linda and the officers, between Chelsea and the tie still lying untouched on the floor. Time itself seemed to pause. Linda stepped forward, her heels clicking like gavel strikes on the polished marble. "Sergeant," she said again, her voice composed but thunderous in tone. "Are you seriously telling me you were about to cuff my son based solely on her word?" Sergeant Miller shifted. It was the first time he'd looked unsure. "Ma'am," she made a clear accusation. Linda cut him off with a raised hand. "Did you review the security footage?" Chelsea stepped in before he could answer, her voice now high-pitched and breathless. "I don't need footage to tell me what I saw. He dropped the tie. He was trying to hide it." Linda turned her eyes on her, cold, controlled. "What you saw was filtered through your bias. What I want is evidence." Reyes, who had been hovering like a man caught in a moral tug-of-war, finally stepped forward. "There's a camera right above the counter and another over the tie display." He looked toward the assistant manager, nervous, pale, clearly caught between fear and duty. "You got access to the feed?" The man nodded, eyes wide, and rushed into the back room. Chelsea crossed her arms, posture stiff, jaw clenched. Her voice was nearly a whisper now. "I don't need a video to know what I saw." Linda's response was cold steel. "And I don't need another excuse to prove what you ignored." Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours. Darius remained quiet, still in his chair, but his eyes watched everything, every twitch, every glance, every breath. When the assistant manager returned, he was holding a tablet. The screen already glowed with the playback. He handed it to Reyes without a word. The room gathered around in a loose, uncomfortable circle. Even customers, once judgmental, now shamefully quiet, edged forward. Reyes tapped play. No sound. Just clean, cold, undeniable truth. Darius entering the store. Calm, respectful. He spoke to Chelsea, gestured toward the window. He pulled out his envelope, unfolded it, showed the cash. Chelsea tilted her head, narrowed her eyes. They exchanged more words. Then she placed the tie down. Darius picked it up, his touch careful. He turned it in his hands. And then, he dropped it. Nothing dramatic. No sudden movement. Just a slip of silk meeting gravity. Chelsea's reaction came next. mouth wide, hands reaching for the phone, her body animated, performative. She pointed, shouted. Then, the slap. That last part hit hardest. The screen froze on Darius's face just after the impact, his cheek red, his expression unreadable. Reyes was the first to break the silence. "There's no theft," he said, almost like he had to say it out loud to make it real. "There's no intent, just an accident." Linda's gaze never left Chelsea. "You saw what you wanted to see. You filled in the blanks with every ugly stereotype that lives just beneath your skin." Chelsea opened her mouth, closed it. You what?" Linda asked, her tone so calm it scared people. Thought he was suspicious, thought he couldn't afford it, thought his skin color or his wheelchair made him guilty. Chelsea didn't answer. Her eyes fell to the floor, like maybe shame was buried beneath the marble. "You didn't see a boy who saved for weeks to buy a gift for his father," Linda continued. "You didn't see a son. You saw a suspect." Miller stepped back, his jaw clenched. Reyes rubbed the back of his neck. Even the customers began to shift uncomfortably, guilt seeping into their bones. Linda walked to Darius and gently touched his shoulder. "Are you okay?" Darius didn't speak at first. He looked at her, then at the people in the store, the ones who didn't stop it. The ones who stood by, Chelsea, Miller, Reyes, and finally the tablet, now resting silently on the counter like a judge's verdict. "I shouldn't have had to prove anything," he said, his voice low. "No," Linda said. "You shouldn't have. But you did, and you did it with more grace than this store deserved." She turned to Miller. "There will be an internal review of this incident. I expect full documentation. I want Chelsea Grant's name on the report. Her words, her actions." Miller gave a slow, pained nod. Reyes stepped closer. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry, kid," he said. "You handled yourself better than most grown men I've met in this job." Darius didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just looked at Reyes, grateful maybe, but still tired. As Linda and Darius turned toward the exit, Chelsea's voice called out behind them. "I didn't mean—" Linda didn't turn. "But you did it anyway." And with that, they walked away. The glass doors opened to a world that was still turning, still smiling, still unaware of the battles being fought in places lined with velvet and glass. But something had changed. The truth had been seen, and the fall had begun. Outside, the air was cooler, but it didn't feel lighter. Darius rolled beside his mother, the breeze brushing his face, yet the heaviness of what had just happened clung to his chest like soaked wool. The marble floor was behind them, the polished, lies and velvet cases out of sight but not out of mind. Linda walked quietly beside him, keys to her cruiser dangling in one hand, her face unreadable. She hadn't said much since they left the store. She didn't need to. The storm had passed, but the ground was still shaking. Darius finally broke the silence. "I should feel better, right?" he said, more to himself than to her. "Like I proved something, like I won." Linda paused. She didn't look at him. "You shouldn't have had to prove anything in the first place." Behind them, the glass doors of Lenox and Hill reflected a different kind of silence. Customers had resumed shopping, flipping through suits and ties as though nothing had happened. Chelsea stood near the register, pale and shaken, unable to reclaim her authority. Her mouth opened once like she might say something, but nothing came out. She turned away instead, her heels no longer echoing with confidence. Sergeant Miller followed a few paces behind, his eyes downcast. Officer Reyes gave a final look in their direction, something halfway between regret and respect, before disappearing behind the tinted cruiser windows. No confrontation, no apology, just quiet retreat. At the curb, Linda stopped walking. "I'll be calling Cynthia," she said, lifting her phone. "Press office. There's going to be an internal review. Miller's conduct will be documented. So will Chelsea Grant's name. This doesn't end quietly." Darius watched her as she spoke, her voice calm but charged with intent. There was no vengeance in her tone, just a mother's quiet rage reshaped into action. Not yelling, not lawsuits, but accountability. The kind that changed policies, the kind that left scars on institutions, not just people. 3 days later, the footage was everywhere. Lennox and Hill's name trended online, but not for their fashion. The tie, that tie, was back in the display window, but few people cared. The Yelp reviews had turned blood red. Chelsea had been placed on leave. Rumors whispered that it was permanent. Miller's actions were under official investigation, but Darius stayed home. He didn't go back. He didn't speak to reporters. He didn't post about it. There was no victory speech, no viral tweet. He wasn't interested in telling the world what it should have already known. That weekend, Anthony Bennett came home. Military fatigue still crisp, arms strong, voice warm. Darius handed him a small box wrapped in navy paper. His father opened it slowly. Inside, the Lancaster silk tie. Elegant, subtle, perfect. Anthony smiled. "You remembered?" Darius nodded. "Always." His father hugged him tight. Jania laughed softly, teasing the color. Linda watched them from the kitchen, eyes soft for the first time in days. No one mentioned the cost behind the gift. No one said what it had taken to get there. And Darius didn't need to. He just watched the smile on his father's face and held on to one quiet thought. Maybe the world isn't fair, but this time it didn't get to win. Will Darius speak out? Will Brighton Hill finally change? Part 2 is coming soon. Stay tuned.